Lizzy Yarnold, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for speaking to me on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
So start again.
I no, I think it's always good to be honest. I'm good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm. It's not light yet, and it's getting dark there. So that gives us a hint as to the time difference that we're navigating through the recording. So tell me, what's life like for you now?
Yeah, life is both busy and relaxed out here in Auckland. So we're 13 hours time different from the UK, and 13 is obviously quite irritating because it's not 12. It's not easy to work out. But yeah, we're out here for my husband James's work in the America's Cup. So I'm here kind of being a single mum because their working hours are so long. I'm here with our daughter. So yeah, we're just kind of really lucky to be in a non-COVID environment at the moment, but really missing family, friends, everything close, everything English, and the normality, I guess. But there's no normality to 2020. I think it's embracing that change.
Yeah, well, if you're going to have a sanctuary for maybe a year out somewhere, New Zealand's probably a good place to do that, isn't it?
I know, it is amazing. But I have to be honest, the quarantine in a government facility, yes, it was a hotel, but it was tiny, and quarantining in any place, as I'm sure lots of people have been through, where you like order your food, so food comes to you, then you do have to do your washing up in the sink, in the bathroom sink. It got to a point where it was just unbearable. So I'm just glad we got through that together, and we're out on the other side down here in New Zealand.
Oh, wow. I was imagining quarantining to be sort of in the Hilton somewhere, but that sounds a bit more what I imagine a pet would go through at quarantine.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because you're all kind of in it together. Everyone who's quarantining, the army are stationed kind of in the hotels, keeping an eye and looking after you as well. But my daughter kept, there was nowhere to go. So the amount of time she would fall off the bed or bang her head, and we'd have to go down to the nurse's station and explain yet again that she's got all this energy but nothing to do. And yeah, it was a really funny experience going into it. I thought, right, we're going to do these jobs, do these admin stuff that we've been putting off. I had big ambitions of jobs to do, but sometimes as a human, I think emotionally I'm exhausted. Physically, I'm exhausted, and I just have to manage my expectations of myself. And quarantine was a funny little kind of bubble window into that.
And so, is that a role reversal for you and your husband, where previously he was supporting you, and now you're in support of him?
Yeah, we kind of flip flop. So he was working at the Vancouver Olympics as part of the support team. We didn't even really know each other at that point at all. We met when we worked together for about 5 years before we even thought that each other was interesting enough to go out. So we were together by 2014 in Sochi, and then after that in 2016, I think it was James's first America's Cup. So I had the games, he had the cup. Then I had the 2018 games, and now he's got this America's Cup in 2021. So we've always sort of done the constant flip of who supports who. It's literally every day because we're both kind of exhausted. And I think that's made for a good relationship for us because we kind of get the high performance thing. We also get the complete exhaustion thing, and also the real long-term goals of what does short-term stuff look like, but also what's the real thing that everyone's aiming for, everyone together, the whole team. So yeah, now I'm just here supporting him, trying to keep a toddler entertained, and try not to drink too much coffee and too many cakes as well.
That's really fascinating. I think trying to imagine or think of somebody who's got a similar sort of dynamic, or a couple. I've got imagining the cycling Kennys, but they're both pursuing goals at the same sort of time, whereas perhaps you've got these sort of conversations of saying, well, when I'm being supported, I like this, or I like to support you in this way. You've also both got your needs in whichever role that you're playing there.
Yeah, totally. And I think I've just been fortunate that I've sort of met someone who doesn't ever tell me what to do, because relationships are all so different, but I just couldn't stand someone who tried to give me advice. He just listens. I probably give more advice, or have to kind of bite my tongue a little bit. But you do, don't you? You switch roles and you just try and help each other work it all out. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you emailed me to tell me that you're doing you're training as an executive coach. Is that for a career, or is that to improve your active listening skills for your husband?
Do you know what? I met quite a few people on the course initially, and they said how or maybe it was on the second part of the course, because they were on it because the active listening had been so fundamental in helping their relationships. Because there was one guy who said, I learned all I needed to say is, after the other half had sort of had a rant or released this emotion, all he would say was, what do you need me to do, or what do you need of me? And I realised then, I think, the all the lessons I was going to learn about listening and proper good deep conversations through this executive coaching. But it's my aim to be an executive coach. I'm currently trying to collate all my hours and get my executive coaching qualifications. But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. It's all come from my work with the performance lifestyle PLs in the EIS. That's where this inspiration all came from.
I'd love to get into that, and so I'm writing that down. What do you need of me? So Rachel, my wife, co-director of Supported Champions, does our executive coaching. She's been through that process, and if I say something, if she's bit stuck or she's having a bit of a rant or something, and I say, what are your options? She says, don't, I know what you're doing. So she'll know if I'm trying to go into coach mode. Okay, so famously you signed up for Girls for Gold, and that's talent ID scheme, this idea of, okay, we're going to look to see what talent lies in a population. My memory of the campaign was that it was a relatively blank slate. It was sort of Girls for Gold. There's no specific, it was, I think there was quite some narrow offerings, like to Taekwondo, for example, later on. So can you remember what was going through your head when you saw the advert and thought, yep, that's me?
Yeah, it's hard how far back you want me to go and how deep that thinking is, but I guess in short, I always loved sport. I always wanted to be Denise Lewis, doing the heptathlon at 14 GB. Not I wanted to be an Olympian, not to win, but just to wear the kit, to be a part of it. I knew I was skilled at sport. I could pick up any sport almost immediately, but my trouble was really transitioning that to elite level. And in athletics, that was my passion. I would train my heart out. Even as a young teenager, I would get all the multidisciplinary coaches in a room and we'd try and plan the season. And I was driving that as a young athlete. But by 18, 19, I wasn't selected for the internationals. I never got the GB vest. So when Girls for Gold was kind of sent through, I was at university. I just started uni. I was, I guess, 18 and a half. And it was a UK sport run search looking for athletes for 7 different sports, maybe one pentathlon. I'm sure there was cycling and maybe a rowing or some water-based sport as well. My sister, Katie, she's 2 years older than me. She had already got into the handball team 2 years before in the Sporting Giants search. So I think it was a bit of the fact that I knew I could do better. If I could just find a sport, I could maybe make it to the international. But also a bit of the fact that, well, if Katie got through, then, and I'm the sporty sister, that's what it was, that I am she's good, but, I'm the one who's sporty, that, maybe I should try too. So, yeah, literally just signed up. and went up to Loughborough Uni. They kind of tested at different locations, and that was almost bittersweet because Loughborough was obviously my dream as a sports person, but I didn't get the grades for the joint honours course I wanted at Loughborough. They offered me straight geography, and I said, I'm going to stick with what I said. I'll go to another university. So we went up to Loughborough, walking around in this glorious, just palace of ability and sports genes, and I knew I wasn't intelligent enough to go there to study. So it was all a bit weird. We did the first testing day, and I was set on doing modern pentathlon. It was basically the only one that I knew on the list. I'd done lots of horse riding as a kid. I could reasonably swim, and running was terrible, I'll be honest. And I was hoping for that. I was aiming for that. I had in my head, I literally had our lunch bags, me and Gemma, like one of my best mates, we had our lunch bags of jelly babies, bananas, Lucozade, everything that you need, and prepped ready. I've just got to get good numbers for this modern pentathlon thing.
And what did can you remember what you did and what you excelled at? What was the bit that they made perhaps the eyebrows raise up and think, okay, she's probably got some talent here?
It was the 30-metre sprint test. It's for skeleton, it's all about the start. So of all the tests that I did, cycling, I really gave it all out. It was like a 3-minute test. And you could physically see that other athletes were much better than you. But with the sprinting, I guess, because we weren't, racing face to face, it was just me and these little cones in a sports hall and just you're sprinting away. I got a reasonably good time, and from 1,500 girls or women initially tested, I think 100 went through to the skeleton. So we went to Bath Uni, and that was a really weird experience. Just going to another high-performing university, seeing these athletes who, like, everyone had six-packs, everyone had the right kit, the perfect crop top and the matching shorts, the best spikes, and they all looked physically, the ones that would be chosen. I didn't feel, as a javelin thrower, shot putter, that I would have what they wanted at all. And again, I had jelly babies, and I remember we went up to the push track at Bath Uni, and I offered round the jelly babies, and just trying to chat to people, talk to people, because I was so nervous. I didn't feel like I belonged there, really. It was a funny experience. You kind of go back to thinking, right, how am I going to fit in? How am I going to start conversations here and try and show them that if you pick me, I'll do a good job.
So just to go back a moment then, but there must have been a proposition of saying, okay, because of your sprinting, we think that the skeleton could be a really interesting option for you. Something like that. What was the conversation in your head of thinking, I assume there was sort of a, what's that? And then a, maybe, okay. Or was it sort of not too serious enough that you're not throwing yourself down a mountain just yet, that you could sort of still just give it a go?
Yeah, I think that's right, that the fact that skeleton itself wasn't in front of me, it was just getting through the stages. It was trying to be in the group that was whittled down. So from the 100 women, we went to 50, and then you got an email a few weeks later, and the 50 went down to 20. So that's all that I had in my mind. And when I was initially sent the letter from UK Sport saying I'd been selected for skeleton, I'd obviously never heard of this sport. I'd never seen it. I didn't know anything about it. I loved skiing as a kid, but it was just kind of so vastly different to anything I tried. I think that kind of must have caught my imagination, and it literally was the fact that it was a high performance sport somewhere where I knew that there would be the physiologists, the psychologists, the nutritionists, all the people who were passionate about sport. I kind of just wanted to say, hey, let me be a part of it and let's see what we can do. I just wanted to kind of get my foot in the door.
So I remember I did a bit of work with the bobsleigh team sort of between 98 and 2003, I think it was. and have been down a bobsleigh track. Sort of got thrown down it a little bit. Although I was with the USA coach who designed the park, the track at Park City in Salt Lake. So I was in safe hands. But I remember at a training camp in 2000 where they started to do some of this work at the British Olympic Association, and it was very much let's try and pull in some talent from various different quarters. So the summer camp previously had got Mark Lewis Francis, Mo Farah, Goldie Sayers, some real legends of athletics in the future. At the winter sports event, there was a few sports looking around thinking, we haven't got any talent, so let's try and find some. So their initial go was very much physical testing, and Sean Olsen, the pilot of the four-man bob in '98, bronze medal winner at Nagano, he was shaking his head, saying they've tested them physically, fantastic, but they haven't looked at the mentality yet. So was there any sort of assessment of your mental approach, your whether it's thrill seeking, whether it is ability to perform under pressure, anything like that before you started actually sliding?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one I don't necessarily definitely know the answer to. I'm sure from UK sport, the answer would be yes, there were clear psychometric tests, but as an athlete in the early stages of that process, it felt that it was all very physical. And that's what I was, in a basic way, that's all I could kind of control, that's all I can change. So that's what I focused on. What I do remember, though, is by the October later that year, or maybe even the year after, we were given, we had kind of booklets, and in the booklets each week we would receive it. It would have information on how well we'd done in like, we had German lessons at that point, we had strength sessions and push sessions, and there was lots that was provided for us. But there was like info in this booklet of like how we were developing with the team, how we were developing our mental, I don't know what it was, mentality as an individual. And only at that point was I really kind of picking up on the importance of all this other stuff, and actually almost to a point of irritation, because those are like my natural tendencies. That's my natural preference of how I sit within the team or as an individual. So it's kind of tricky to get that feedback, especially as a young athlete, because it's not always the answer that you want. And that's fine. Now, as a more mature athlete, I know that understanding who I am as a person is all about, bettering myself. But the psychological testing, I'm sure they were doing, and certainly happened when we got onto ice the first time. You go down and you either just love it or I guess there's three. I think you love it and you want to go again. You sort of are quite scared, as I was, pretty scared, but thinking, okay, I can kind of know what's going on here. I'm tempted to give it another try. And then there's that third option of thinking, no way, this is not for me. And I guess you see straight away whether people are going to be up for a sport like skeleton or not. It's super, super adrenaline filled, thrilling, like awesome, but at the same time, pretty I'm not sure what the right word is. It's tough. It is a tough sport.
So did you have any coaching as to how's it going to feel, what to do under different scenarios? Presumably you got on and you just got gently shoved, or you went half track or something like that. Well, how did it start, and how well prepared were you for potentially just getting thrown down like a rag doll?
Yeah, so we had this amazing coach, Mark Wood. He was my talent coach for like a couple of years at least, and with the team for a long time. He's out now, doesn't coach with the British, but he was there on our first camp. He was there for my first goes down the track, and probably most tracks around the world. And he was amazing at just like preparing people, giving you the information that you needed to know, but not giving you too much information that it then just, took over your mind. So we walked down the track before we actually got on a sled. We saw what the corners looked like, which lefts and right, and and then were told to do a bit of homework to prep for our first goes on the ice. Part of that prep was cutting up a camping mat and sticking it, gaffer taping it to our like loosest clothing. So I had shoulders, elbows, wrists covered, everything kind of Michelin Man ready for my first run. And then I guess it's hard to explain how it's going to feel. But I guess we would have been told it would obviously be fast, just focus on those few corners that we were told about. And then once you've done it once, it kind of, you understand the vibrations, the noise, the motion, and the fact that you don't really have any control at that stage. And only then can you really build on any kind of changes. You've kind of just got to go down and hope that you enjoy it a little bit at least to carry on.
I'm imagining that the camping mat was the final assessment. Right, so here's a camping mat. Go into your room, cut it up, and stick it to yourself. She's still here. She's past it. She's gone for it. She doesn't think this is loopy enough, and she's turned up.
Yeah, it's all a part of it, isn't it? And I don't mind that stuff. I prefer to prep. I mean, most athletes do, don't they? To know that I've done something to try and make a bad situation a bit better. But even as a kid, when we would ski, my good friend Bonds, he said to me, Lizzie, what you need to do at the top of the hill is just bend down into a little ball and tuck your poles underneath your armpits and just, stay there, and that will be really good. And I, 7-year-old Lizzie, did that and literally went down the whole of this run, and my dad's careering after me saying, Lizzie, stop, what are you doing? And I think sometimes I just had that mentality that you just got to be a bit out of control. I remember the feeling of skiing, of feeling that looseness, like when you're catching the air, you're not quite in control, but loving that feeling and not knowing what was going to happen next.
That's an interesting one in terms of, so you could almost sense and connect with something at a very, very young age of just happy and to explore that sort of thrill-seeking side of it. I think there's I don't know, this is just too hackneyed as an idea, but there does certainly the idea of thrill-seeking types, people that climb mountains, people that throw themselves off and do these crazy parachute jumps and so on, that there's a certain mentality to that where they're always looking for that. They don't really have the amygdala light up very much, so they're always pursuing that sort of adrenaline rush. You seem quite emotional. You seem quite in touch with how you're feeling. You seem as though you're very aware of the situation, but you've almost perhaps have that switch as well of, actually, you know what? That's something I really love too.
Yeah, I think you've got that nail on the head, because, or whether it's just the competitive edge, there's definitely a change when I'm at the track. And this started at an early point when I was even at the athletics track. My mum would say to me, you should talk to the other athletes like everyone else does, like have a chat and just talk to, and I would say, no, I've got to switch on. I'm focused. I'm thinking about the next jump. It was always in long jump, because it was the second day in heptathlon and everyone knew each other, and you're getting into the second day. So when I'm at competition, I just switch into that mode completely. And the thrill-seeking thing. Now I've retired, I've got no desire at all to do anything. I even training is weird. Going to the gym just would feel really weird. I swim, I run, but it's amazing how it all changes now I've retired.
That's interesting. You're spent, are you?
Yeah.
You mentioned something there that I was going to pick up on. That was interesting. Switch. I think there's something kind of unusual about that, and or very particular and special. Being able to not necessarily just be focused and determined and crazed all the time, to do that when it's the right moment. And I can imagine how particularly relevant that is to skeleton. Because one of the factors that I noticed about sort of touring with the bobsleigh team was I looked around and thought, this is quite bleak. We're in a hotel and then we travel to the track and we're up at the top of an icy mountain and we're all huddled in a room, and then one of them goes out and throws himself down the track. I thought, this is quite a strange existence, warming up in the car parks, and I would imagine that deselects quite a lot of people too. How were you in that sort of scenario?
Yeah, I think you've explained it really well, actually, that you do live in the hotel room where you're doing stretching or prepping for the gym or eating the right food, recovering. And then you go to the track, you warm up, you explosively have this performance, you're exhausted, then you just basically go back to the hotel. And in living on circuit for 6 months of the year, it was very apparent early on that camaraderie and my relationships with fellow athletes was really important to get through, like to literally just get through, to have someone to have a cup of tea with. So Laura and I, we started skeleton at the same point in Girls for Gold. Then we kind of joined up with Donna as well. So as you get better, you sort of move through the ranks of competition. And we ended up on World Cup and ICC with Laura, Donna and me, Lizzy. And the three of us were just, I think, keep each other going. That in an evening when you're at the hotel and it is looking a bit bleak, it's winter, it's cold, -20, you've got someone to just watch Downton Abbey with or have a cup of tea and chat about life. And actually these women were literally my hardest competition. And on the track the next day, I was desperate, as they were desperate to beat me. I was trying to think, how can I improve? Although I was self-focused, it is about trying to be better, of course. And thank goodness I had that ability to make friends in a way that we truly could switch off and be together as humans as well as athletes.
So Laura and Donna, just give us the intro to those.
As in those people? Yeah. So Laura Dees, she came from equestrian, actually. So we had a bit of a similar understanding of growing up with horses. We both lived through house renovations as well. So it's funny the things you connect with people about. And then we did skeleton together for 10 years and actually ended up on the podium in Pyeongchang together. I won the gold medal, Laura won the bronze medal. And Laura's still competing, aiming for Beijing, which is really exciting. And then Donna Crichton, she's just, both these women were my bridesmaids. Donna was doing the sport long before Laura and I began. She was the knowledgeable one, the one that had seen it and done it and knew. And I just learned so much from her, how to, hold myself in competition, how to respond, how to be a good person. Sometimes in life you meet those people that are just really lovely people. So I'm very lucky to have them both in my life.
See, there's that sort of dichotomy again. Downton Abbey, cup of tea. I heard you knit. That doesn't seem that this is the sort of compatible outlet for Bob Skeleton, but that's intriguing. I remember doing some work with the judo team, and we did some sprint training, and I told them all to tuck their pockets of their tracksuits and shorts the other way in case they caught a thumb in it. And they were like, "Oh, we like broken thumbs." And when they went back to their residencies, all they watched was compilations of fights that led to some sort of injury, which really fitted with their sporting pursuit. But Downton Abbey and Bob Skeleton, again, I'm feeling this sort of, maybe it's the yin and the yang of, right, I get the adrenaline there. The last thing I need is some sort of adrenaline-based TV habit.
Yeah, but the ability to switch on and off was something that I used literally second by second. So between the runs of a competition, you have run one, then it could be literally an hour or half an hour before run two. And in that time, I can't stay in my suit. I can't stay doing high knees. I've got to at least chill out, eat, refuel, drink a cup of tea. I always had a soup container, thermos container with tea in, and I'd say, I'll just do the first run, then I'll go and have my cup of tea. But I would also begin to sleep in the changing room, a room full of people, but I would put down my yoga mat and just sleep in front of them. And that was just for me, jumper over my head for me. But quite quickly I realised that actually the psychological impact on my competition of just lying right in front of them, switched off, was really quite effective, and something that I kept doing right through both Olympic finals as well.
I can imagine. You just everyone else is pacing up and down, looking super focused, maybe with some hip hop in their ears or something, and there's just you chilling with your cup of tea.
Yeah, I know. It is so weird thinking back about it, but I didn't think it was weird until other people start picking up on it. But there you go.
So there's another thing that you mentioned there, 2 runs, and I always thought that was so peculiar, but also a necessary sort of procedure of practicing. You just don't get that much practice.
Yeah.
So that is in itself really odd. I know that the various different tracks are so different, and I presume you'd be practicing visualization beforehand and so on. But just that uncertainty of, it's that track. I only get 2 practice goes before we actually start competition. How did you get your head around that?
It is tricky. It's hard for anyone to understand, I think. So you have 6 official training runs before a competition. Most races have 2 runs. The Olympics is a bit odd. It has 4, which is over 2 days. And you're right, the fact that you only get 6 minutes practice essentially on a track. So Park City that we were talking about, I go there once a year. And Park City, the start bit, so where I'm running with the sled next to me, in Park City it's not covered. So the issue with that is it snows a lot in Utah. It's high up in Utah and there are bears everywhere, but when it snows, it snows. And if you're the athlete that's, late in the order and it starts just, starting to snow, when it gets to you, it is snowing. There's snow in the grooves where I need to push the sled. You can't run because you're going to slip over. So even when you've got 6 minutes practice, these are so severely affected by the weather, the rain or the snow, the ice temperature, whether bobsleigh has been there the week before or luge, because the ice cut is a bit different. How you enter and exit the corner, the ice will be literally cut differently. And just so many things can change a race. So visualization is hugely important. And I remember going to the Junior World Championships. I think it was my first Junior World Championships in Park City. I had only been there, I think I'd done 10 runs because we had the 6 runs official training and a few extra at the start because we were so young. And I lost that race by 1/100th of a second against a Canadian athlete, obviously Canada and America. She was able to travel and had been to this track loads of times. And I was just sat there thinking, I've had these 2 runs in competition. We've combined the time, and how it's ended up is I'm 1/100th of a second behind her. And I was so frustrated, and there's nothing you can do. The race is the race. But what is 1/100th of a second? Is it me just literally pushing my head forward as I go through the line? I think that was me early on in my career. You quickly start to realise that it's not just about those 2 runs or the 4 runs. You have to start making the changes or controlling the controllables every single day, because if psychologically all I can think about is I've only got these 2 runs and what happens on the day is all that counts, I probably would have lost my mind. I had to bring it down to kind of the ground, bring it down to a level that I could manage and try and make that slow impact. And how I visualized that impact was building up a wall and building up my foundations, and at the top of the foundations, not on purpose, but it would become a podium, and that's where I hoped I'd see myself.
So an experience like that, where you perhaps haven't won, so it didn't fully ratify your that you were the winner, but it also gave you a lot of clues as to, well, I've done that with minimal preparation against opposition that has probably got vastly advanced advantage. And then you're starting to think, ooh, I've got it. When did you start realizing I've got a shout here?
Years later. I think I started doing the sport in 2009. just, learning how to do it. And then it wasn't till 2012, so only a few years later, I was invited to be at the World Championships, the Senior World Championships. I only got my spot because I'd actually won the Junior World Championships that year. You get a free pass. And so this was in Lake Placid, America. I'd been to the track, I think, once before as a training couple of weeks. And I was in the room, in this little weird changing room, with the car park outside where everyone's running around. And in the room was Katie Ulander, Noelle Pikus-Pace, amazingly strong Americans. The Brits, we had Amy Williams, reigning Olympic champion, Shelley Rudman, she'd had a silver Olympic medal as well. And then I was the third British athlete, this young upstart. And through the competition, obviously I switched on that aggression, I switched on that part of Lizzy that I needed for the race. And through the competition of 4 runs, I sort of slowly went from 8th position to 6th to 3rd, and I sort of slowly kind of clawed my way up. And I ended up in 3rd position in bronze medal place. And in 4th was Amy Williams, and in 5th was Shelley Rudman. And that afternoon, I realised that, maybe whatever was needed to be a skeleton athlete and to compete in skeleton, I had something, a little bit of it. And I only had 2 years before Sochi, so it was on, basically.
And then how did you process that? So did you compare notes with Amy and Shelley, or did you sort of reconcile that with your coach or other support staff of thinking, am I there? Did you have those discussions internally with yourself or with others?
I think it was probably an internal, just kind of working it through, an internal reflection. The coach I'd been working with, Mickey Grunberger, he actually left the British team at the end of the season. That was the last race, and he went to work for the Swiss, I think, at the time. So I started the next season with a new coach. I had someone new to work with. Amy Williams, I think, actually retired that summer, or at least just did 1 extra winter and then retired. So we didn't, although we were training partners for a few years, we didn't connect on a level of kind of sliding intelligence at all. She was always far beyond what I was achieving. But Shelley Rudman, although we didn't compare notes as such, she was someone who I competed with up until Sochi, and she was someone that I'd kind of just rubbed along with in the way that I was learning from her. Everything she was giving out, I was trying to kind of take in, to appreciate, to just absorb. She was someone who knew how to compete and had longevity in the sport.
Amazing. So, and then approaching Sochi, and you're starting to get some results. How was it going into Sochi?
Going into Sochi, I can reflect on it now. I wouldn't have said at the time that I was getting to a place where Sochi was my race to lose. The World Cup season leading into the Olympics was a really good battle between Noelle Pikus-Pace, the American, and I. So we would literally flip, and she would have first and I would go for first. She would have second and I'd come third. And it was just a real great battle back and forth. And actually that really kept my focus, not only on me, but on her, and on trying to just keep developing forward the fact that there are different races, there are different venues. Each week we were going to a new place. She had something, or other athletes had that ability for that track. I might have had it the next week. And the fact that the Olympics were at a track that no one really knew, only the Russians had been there a lot, but everyone else was just kind of starting from the same place. And that was really exciting, especially as a nation that didn't have a track. We didn't have any advantage at home. But what we had a huge advantage in was sharing knowledge, sharing our understanding, and learning very quickly.
And I'm keen to ask you, when you realised that it was a possibility of the win, almost as much within the competition itself. My memory of watching it was the overlay technology that they would show on the TV, where they would compare the current leader with the previous run, for example. And I remember by the time that they got to your, was it fourth run, I think, they almost didn't fit on the screen because such as was your advantage. So how were you able to stay focused and intentional about what you needed to do to continue on the road in the right way when you knew that the advantage was strong through the competition?
There wasn't any knowledge that the advantage was strong enough. So there wasn't a need to stay in it. I was absolutely committed, and being a younger athlete against those who just had so much experience, you can lose 2, 3, 4 tenths of a second within a run easily, you know. So I knew going into the second day of competition, I had half a second advantage on Noelle. That if she'd gone home, if she'd done her homework, if she had rested, if she was ready, she could easily just whoop my ass, basically. I knew it straight off. I think I heard that her son hadn't been very well that night and hadn't slept well. And I know it's an awful thing now as a parent to say, but there was that kind of breath of relief of thinking, okay, I know Noelle would have been with her son if he wasn't well, and she hasn't slept well, and that's my advantage today. That's what I have from this situation. So I went into the third run. I was before Noelle in the running order, and I extended the half a second lead to 3/4 of a second. And only at that point, I think I got back in the truck with my sled, and I hid my face behind my sled. And I just had a bit of a smile thinking, okay, we are almost there. It's one more run. You know, I just gotta, that's the only moment I thought maybe I've got something near this, you know, maybe.
Is that enjoyable? I'm just almost imagining you want to enjoy the moment of, gosh, that's exciting and that's appetizing, but you don't want to get carried away. You almost perhaps got to feel as though you shut that down. How did that feel?
I gave myself like half a minute of thinking maybe this is it. And then you're straight back to you, because of how my preparation worked. I had mapped out literally minute by minute of, I get back to the top of the track, I check my rock in the sled, I sort out my bags and chuck more stuff in the truck to go for the down bag. Right, I need to get the suit off, I need to get into my normal kit, I need to eat something, I need to drink another cup of tea. Then I'm going to do some stretching, then I'll have the nap, so that came early.
Yeah, intimidate
and then
the opposition
I have a bit
with
of
a
physio.
nap.
Nap, exactly. The nap is essential. And so because I'm kind of into that treadmill of prepping for the next run, there was no time to think of anything else. And I appreciated that, because regardless of whether I was winning or not winning, it took me to a place of psychological focus, and then switching with the skipping or the nap or whatever I needed. I sort of automatically took myself there.
Oh, that's interesting. I think that's whenever I've prepared that sort of pre-competition routine, whether it is a certain type of warm-up or a certain regimen of supplements, for example, I've sometimes wondered whether athletes really care what's on there. It's the structure, it's the process, something. It's having something to channel their attention into, as opposed to letting their thoughts spiral out of control in that way.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, and then so tell me about the winning run.
I made a real cock up actually on the winning run. So there were 2 left-hand corners. I was totally focused. We had a long lead into corner 1. It was like a really long run in, and then corner 1, quick switch into 2. And I forgot to steer corner 2, and you needed to do something. Sometimes you do something, sometimes you don't. And experience is that knowledge of knowing. And I forgot to do something, and I skidded the whole way down between 2 and 3. And that was only important because it was a gradient drop. When it's dropping, you've got to relax, tuck in, and take the speed. And I was thinking, oh my God, they're going to kill me. I'll get to the bottom, and Andy and Woody are just going to kill me. And then I suddenly switched to, I just need to get into corner 3. It's fine. I'll just get into corner 3. And clearly I'm going to go from 2 to 3. I'm on an ice track. I can't go anywhere else. But as soon as I was into 3, I thought, right, focus. 4 was a swooping, then straight into 5-5 high pressure. And, you know, I can literally take myself into that thought process of making the mistake, but just switch it back on, and then enjoying the smoothness. Down the bottom of the track, we purposefully made the decision to take lots of hits. It was using up time or wasting time to over control the sled and avoid some hits on the wall. So I'd smack the side, go up, I think 14, and then hit 3. We had 3 more lefts to the finish line. And I'd roll around the corner and then tap the wall, roll around the corner, tap the wall. And I think equally I was thinking, A, this hurts, and probably not helping my speed, but B, you know, I know what I'm doing and I just need to get to the finish line. I just need to get there. And that was insane. When I finished and I looked up at the clock, it was just an overwhelming exhilaration, like tingles and wow, it's over, it's finished, I've done it, like the relief that it's over. And then immediately I went to thinking, right, I'm going to have drug testing in a minute, so am I ready for a wee? And I'm hungry, and like the normality kicked in almost immediately, which was very unexpected.
I might ask you about that in a moment, but it sounds, I'm watching you recall it, and you're going through it in almost minutiae of attention that you can remember it with such detail. Not only the conversations that you might or might not have to have with your coaches to apologise for quarter 2, compensating, but also sticking with your routine. But almost just how impressive that was, just to hear your memory of each of the different segments of the track. Were you that mindful? Was it that much of a flashbulb memory that it's just imprinted in there?
I think that I've probably talked through it so much that I visualize those runs a lot more than I do other tracks. So it's part the memory and reliving it. But the flashbulb moments really come to me in odd segments. So I had physio just before the 4th run, and my ankle was really sore. I'm like double jointed. And Kay, the physio, just kind of rubbed my ankle, and we both knew like what she was doing was pointless. It was going to be fine, and she would just give me a bit of a rub, and I just will always remember that moment. I was eating a pear, and she was just chatting, trying to be normal, and it's not just the runs, the runs down the track. It's all those little interactions with people that seem to really stay in my mind. That's what's meant the most to me as an athlete.
Mm. And so drug testing, didn't you really get a chance to celebrate other than getting onto the podium? And it feels as though a lot of people that have experienced the highs that you have said something similar about how you get quickly switched into the mundane or the normality.
Yeah, but that's kind of nice. Like I remember hugging. So I saw my coach Danny. He met me at the bottom of the track as always, and we hugged. And he handed me the Union Jack, and I walked back towards where Mum and Dad and everyone was, and that was insane. Like just because realizing together, looking at each other, that we'd won the gold medal, and it really was a we, the whole we, the team, the family, everyone. I hugged them, and James said to me, I said to him, I love you. And he said, it's going to go crazy now. Because he'd seen what happened with Amy, after she won gold, how it had just kind of 2 days of media tour and madness. And then after that point, although it was busy, it was essentially, lovely media interviews. And I was really lucky to be involved in all of that. But yeah, you've got drug testing, and I take 4 hours. I literally take 4 hours to wee. And I have to, when I go in, I say, look, I'm going to be here for hours. So do we want to get some food? Can we get, what do we need?
Get some downturn on. Let's get some,
yeah, exactly.
Let's get some downturn. Anyone want a jelly baby?
Their life story by the end. It's quite nice.
What was it like then starting to think about the next season or think about continuing on?
I very immediately realised that I hadn't yet been world champion. I had, at that point of Sochi, I was World Cup champion, so winning the series. I was Olympic champion, so if I could get... actually, I think I was European champion as well, so I literally had the one left. And if you can get all 4 within 2 seasons, that's the shortest amount of time you can do it. That was obviously the big hairy goal that was totally on my radar. And so I came back to the UK. I was desperate to do like a school tour, visiting lots of schools in a short amount of time. So I was signing so many autographs, so much so that my back got a bit worse that year. I had to also manage getting back to training, getting back to form, try not to accept the fact that you lose a bit of form when you're busy trying to open sandwich shops and go to schools and do random things for someone's family's uncle's mate's sister. But that was a busy summer, that was hard. And my mum also was diagnosed with breast cancer 3 months after the win in Sochi. So that was challenging, being in Bath, wanting to be in Kent with family, and that whole season leading after the games. I was, of course, focused on competing, but hugely emotional at the fact that I just didn't necessarily have the motivation to grind out being better every day, having that self-betterment in not only sliding, but nutrition, strength work. Everything was needing to be more. I had this big target on my back, of course. So after that season, when I luckily, or I say luckily, was able to be world champion, I worked my butt off and became world champion a year after Sochi. I had all 4. I had it, I'd done it. I decided that I just had to take a break. I didn't know how to say this to the programme. I didn't know how it would be received. But I said, if I want to go to Pyeongchang, and I want to, I need to take some time to work out what is my motivation and why am I trying to get a gold medal when I already have one? What is it that's different? And not about the gold medal, but what's different about it to me.
Do you think you needed that burnout feeling to be able to ask those questions of yourself? Because they're quite they're quite philosophical in terms of your sort of orientation to not only your sport, but almost, it sounds a bit like to your life too, in questioning yourself and where you're going. Did that only come from having really flogged yourself through that season?
I think I'd probably been flogging myself for years since I was involved in skeleton. It's always been my mentality of any elite athlete that you've got to be prepared to be in the gym longer and do more sled work. And even my husband said he built the sled with Rachel Blackburn, but when we did sled checks, I would be in the garage far longer than anyone else. My eye for detail was so minute that, of course, this burnout was probably going to happen at some point. And thank goodness it happened. I was able to achieve what I achieved when I did. But I think I was ready to become a bit more than an athlete, which sounds really odd. But when you've been an athlete for many years and you're sort of given training programs, given exercises, talked through the plan, I needed to somehow have a career development plan. I didn't want to just be the athlete for another cycle. Although I had so much to learn from this amazing support team, I also needed to realise in myself that I had a voice. I had something to say. I'd learned something I knew about myself, and I wanted to kind of be a part of the journey going into the next Olympics. And actually, so much so, that desire was so strong that I had said to my PL, my performance lifestyle advisor, that I'd rather win a silver medal and try and do it more my way than do it the same way and win gold.
I love that.
Which sounds really odd.
Well, I think that's that phrase there, ready to become more than an athlete. It's almost as if the becoming an athlete is the sort of cocoon phase in some ways, and then you start realizing actually it's beyond that, it's more than that. And I don't know whether enough athletes have that realization, attaching their identity and their self-worth to the results that they get in their sport. You've had a real connection with that performance lifestyle service, and I think for those that are listening that haven't got a familiarity with it, that's very much about helping you as an athlete to develop the resourcefulness that you need in sport, but beyond it.
Yeah, it is. And it's a service that people aren't necessarily sure how to use or why to use it, or why do you need a performance lifestyle? What does that even mean? But I think performing well, I realised going into Pyeongchang was much more about aiming for more than a gold medal. Gold medal is an end point, it's something physical, but to really perform and to be better, I had to go way, way, way above and beyond that gold. And then hopefully I just kind of, it would happen on the way. I'd sort of collect it on my way through, because also then it sort of took the pressure, psychological pressure off of thinking it's just about this physical thing. Actually, for me, it was about just how good can I be on this day at this random track in Korea I've never really been to. But what kind of athlete am I going to be at that stage after being in the sport for 10 years? How do I want to be remembered? You know, it's that thing that everyone loves to say. How do I want to hold myself? How do I want to speak to my teammates, to my coaches? Who do I want to be as a person?
And was that a switch point where you've gone from being the recipient, almost a passenger on the plane, a recipient of services, a recipient of coaching, through to piloting the craft, and this is what I need, team? Because I think that's quite an important pivot point for an athlete, particularly in the senior sort of stages, that they go, actually, this is the way I'd like to do it. Did that feel like a conscious choice at that phase where you're timing out from the sport?
It was definitely a conscious change. It was a discussion that I had with many of the team members to just talk through, this is what I'm thinking, this is how I'm hoping it would work, and that I needed their help and their guidance along the way. It wasn't something that I was going to put on the team or do by myself. I just wanted a seat at the table. So we made lots of changes, and the team were amazing, actually. They did, I felt as though they really listened to me. Now, you know, after Pyeongchang, I do reflect back and think, what did they do differently? I wonder if they treated every athlete in this way. But it was the feeling that I felt empowered, I felt listened to. And we did this thing every month called critical review. So Eric, my sliding coach, and Ed, my S&C coach, we would sit in a room, always physically together. I wanted to make sure we heard each other's voices. We heard firsthand what we were really emotionally thinking about things. And the mistakes or the things that weren't going so well, there were owned mistakes, there were owned developments or changes. And we critically analysed everything, came up with a plan together, and then went again for another month. And just that simple difference of thinking, I don't have to own up to making mistakes and be in trouble for them. Not that that was necessarily the case, but to know that I can be a part of making the mistakes, which are essential, but also of making this mistake a success. I'm a part of it, was hugely motivational.
I often get asked about, what are the characteristics of high performance teams, and probably it's easy to focus on things like blame or sort of those corrosive behaviours that just take away from that positivity of being constructive and looking forward. I often say the simplest thing is to debrief. And debriefing as an exercise can identify characteristics that you could improve for tomorrow. But the very simple exercise of debriefing turns your experiences and the events that have happened from mistakes into fuel or firepower for the future. That sounds like a very powerful exercise that you were not only part of, but active in too.
Yeah, and I was grateful to be a part of that critical review process, I have to admit. I was grateful that people were prepared to be a part of it as well. But I think what you're saying about debriefing is so key, because especially when you've had a bad day, to just kind of air it out, saying stuff just kind of breaks it down a bit. And to know that you're not the only one who's made these mistakes. The people that you're talking to, your team, your coaches, have probably seen it all before and know what to do next. So talking, I think, is always the best therapy.
And so, what was different going into Pyeongchang versus Sochi? What was Lizzy Yarnold? If you compare the two Lizzy Yarnolds, what was different?
It was awful going into Pyeongchang. It was awful. So I can't they were worlds apart. Sochi, I was on top form. It was my race to lose kind of thing. Pyeongchang, I was just, something wasn't working, something wasn't clicking. In the Olympic season, I'd do a race and it was rubbish. And I'd think, right, it's okay. I've done this before. I need to work harder, think more, think further, train, tougher than everyone else, prep more, all this more. And the next week, the result would get worse. It's all right, I've done this before, I know what to do. I'll just, ask the right questions, train smarter. And it got to a point, I came 23rd. So 20 is the cut point where you get a second run or not. I was 23rd. And I was just walking around the car park and in tears. And the Russian team came past, the whole team, and they were saying something, they were just laughing. And, something like Olympic champion, da-da-da-da-da. And it was a proper low point. It was proper low. And my coach, Andy, he actually said, look, just take the next 2 weeks. We've got a racing break. Just take the next 2 weeks. Just, reset, refresh. And I had a very honest conversation with my psych at the time. And honesty, I think, is what I really needed, is what on earth is going on? What needs to happen right now? And slowly realising that when people believed that because I had been Olympic champion before, because I knew what to do, they trusted that I would kind of pull it out the bag and like put on a special suit and, a special superwoman hat and make it all right. I wasn't the athlete that I was before. I had to stop trying to search to be her. I had to work out what on earth was going on now. And it was the thing I was doing too much of was thinking, was doing, was, expecting too much from myself. I was more intelligent as a slider, but I was forgetting that intelligence. So I had to learn to enjoy it again. I basically said everything, or the plan that we came up with, Ed and I, is everything else that isn't enjoyment in sliding just has to be minimised, has to go for a couple of weeks. Everything is about just getting on the sled and finding that intuition, finding that peace, finding the reactive sliding in the moment. That was my intelligence, was going down the track and knowing exactly what needed to happen when it needed to happen, not this prep. Prep was learning. I was getting towards expert level. So then I started clawing back my results going in towards the Olympics. I still wasn't GB1. I was selected behind Laura as GB2 and sort of clawed my way into the selection team. So yeah, it was a tough few years for sure.
Okay, that's really interesting in terms of, it sounds as though a very strong sense of backing yourself, going down to sort of absolutely fundamental principles of your performance versus, you said that phrase there, expecting too much from yourself. And I think that a lot of people, and I think a few commentators like a little catchphrase that is now down to who wants it most. And as you say, that trying to control or making it too effortful can actually choke performance, in the sense that you tighten, you're obsessive, you don't see the bigger picture. It's not easy flow type performance.
Yeah, totally. I think I always spoke about flow state and I almost forgot how to do it. Effortful is the enemy of success, I think.
I think a lot of people would like are going to take that and and put that in place if it's effortful. Obviously, there's effort. You're driving in a different way there. You're reminding yourself of what's important. But you also had a number of health issues.
Yeah, I almost forget all that stuff, to be honest. I was learning more about my vestibular disorder, so I had damage to one of my inner ears that was causing issues on particular tracks, on particular corners, often in high pressure when I'm changing direction. And that was tricky because it would happen at, when I didn't necessarily know it was going to happen. In a race in Altenburg in Germany, a very tough track. It happened twice in the race, and these affect results. Results affect your selection for the games. And fortunately, I had a very strong medical team around me who knew what was going on, understood the disorder and knew how it would kind of react and present itself. So I felt very confident and safe with them. So I had my vestibular disorder. I also had a tumour in my knee, which I didn't tell anyone about, but it was causing discomfort. And I also, leading into the games, just a week before, I was sort of picking up and developing this chest infection. So bad, actually, that I was sent home early because they thought it was pneumonia. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? You pick things up along the way, and it just becomes a part of the challenge.
Vestibular system's quite important, I would imagine, for skeleton performance. Eyes, ears, proprioception. It's quite important.
Yeah, and it was funny when I went sort of public around it. People would message who had a similar or the same disorder, and one lady said every time she puts washing in the machine, she falls into the washing machine because it just something about the motion or that position that just throws her off. And I felt so awful for her, and I'm so grateful for myself that luckily it doesn't affect me at all in normal life. It was just when I'm doing my job or doing the sport that I love. And it was hard to watch. It's hard to watch for family and friends and other athletes to see me come off the sled and not be able to stand, not know where I am. And it got very emotional for me, a lot of anxiety around the disorder as well. I think psychologists, I know normal people, non-sporting people don't really have psychologists, but they really helped me work through all of these issues which I knew were potentially going to harm me in Pyeongchang. In the track in Pyeongchang, we'd visited a couple of times. It had never affected me. We didn't anticipate that it would affect me. But of course, on the first run of the Olympics, it kicked in.
And then how did you cope with that?
Every time I had a vestibular order issue, it was different. It sort of affected me more or less, depending what had happened. And this particular go, I think, including my chest infection, I reacted really badly. And I went to the top of the track and I charged into the loos in the changing room. And when you want to be sick, but you don't know if being sick is helpful, you just need to I was hanging over the sink with my wrists under really cold water, trying to think this is going to help. I just need to just be sick right now. I can't see couldn't see my phone. I was trying to call James, call everyone and just say, look guys, I feel awful. I don't want to go again because I don't feel right. But if I go again, then know that it's my first place that I have at the moment that's gone, that, I'm just trying to do what I can do. And I was over the sink and the physio, Louise, came in and she was like, you're all right? And I was like, no, I'm not all right. I feel sick. I hate skeleton. I don't want to do it. I can't do it. I feel awful. I don't know what to do. And she just calmly said, unfortunately, you're quite good at it, Lizzy. So if you could go again, that would be great. And so I just sort of laughed a bit, and she'd been through this protocol with me, the return to performance, so many times. We kind of sit down, try and do what I need to do, have a blanket over my face to reset my brain a little bit, to calm the vestibular system. Then you'd warm up, you see how the body's reacting, and I seemed to be okay. I could manage. So I did the second run, a survival run, I called it, to just stay in the race. And I came down in ninth run time, but I managed to be still in third place. So I was essentially still in the race.
That sounds like a difficult conversation from your physio there, in terms of just, no, go on, off you go. Because it's not, shall we say, it's not snooker where, perhaps the worst you can get is a splinter. Being in control of your faculties and having that anticipation of being able to go down and do that well, but also safely. What was that conversation going in your head of thinking, I'm struggling with this, but actually it's so close now?
Yeah, Louise and I had been through this situation many times, and she knew me, she knows me very well. So Louise is very used to kind of knowing what to say in that moment. I think we had about an hour before my second run, so there's a lot of time to check how I'm feeling and check in. And I knew that I didn't need to make a decision until basically the athlete before me went down the track. So it is a difficult conversation when I was feeling so low and so awful, but I was so grateful that we'd almost been through it all before, that I was surrounded by people that knew what to say in that moment. I felt very fortunate that it's not just about the physical stuff. It's not about the sled. Sometimes it's about having that mate next to you, believing in you.
And it was a real comeback, wasn't it? I mean, how do you process the responding and performing under that sort of pressure, that adversity, versus your first gold medal, where you have the form, you've got that sort of confidence platform that you can go in, everything relatively stable, whereas here things are changing and uncertain, but you're responding to that. Are you able to compare the two performances at all?
I don't think you can compare them. And actually, I think an athlete changes so much in 4 years that it would kind of be pointless if you did compare them. It wouldn't really be a true comparison. The tracks are different. It's not 400 meters that it's the same track. It's a different place. It's a different sled that I'm using. It's everything is adapting and moving on. But I think what I'd say in Pyeongchang is that things were moving very quickly. By day 2 of performance, I knew I had a very bad chest infection. We had to adapt all my warm-ups that, I said I have it minute by minute worked out. We had to adapt that so the lactic acid wasn't building and I could manage my oxygen intake. And I had to steam. I was trying to steam my face, every 20 minutes, every 15 minutes to try and get something through. And so it was just a kind of an amazing combination of having this plan, this really strong plan, but actually allowing myself to be adaptable and having faith in the fact that once I get to the start line and I'm on the block with the sled, it is all on me. I love the fact that I had this amazing support team, but once I'm handed the sled, it's just me in an ice chute, just literally going for it. And that's the only similarity, I guess, between any race in our sport, is that it was all on me. It was my performance, me and the clock, and that's all that mattered.
So how did you come back? You've got a vestibular issue. You've got a rising chest infection on day 2. How did you do it?
I think I was just chipping away, literally just. So run 3, it was a survival run as well. I just wanted to stay in the competition. And after 3 runs, instead of Noel being my competition, it was Janine Flock. So the Austrian athlete I competed with a lot, but she hadn't performed really at this international level at such a high level. So going into run 4, she was in first place, I was in second place. We had 200s and then another few athletes, German and Laura as well. And I stepped out of the change rooms, walked along the corridor and down the steps before the 4th run, and I was looking through this glass door at the block, and we had a clock and countdown 2 minutes. I was going to walk out, and it was like 2.5 minutes. So I stood there just kind of swaying from side to side, and I heard someone run down the stairs, and it was Janine Flock. She ran down, sort of stormed out of the glass door, and I was sort of millimeters from grabbing her and saying, "No, Janine, it's me first and then you're after." But I stopped because I realised she needed to be out there. She needed the noise to be present. Whatever she needed, she went there to get it. And also in that moment, I realised that her head had gone because she wasn't staying warm. She wasn't working with her process. You don't go and stand outside in minus whatever temperatures for 5 minutes before you're going to do an explosive run. So I headed out to the start block and did my run as best I could. I think actually that was quite a good run. I didn't make any mistakes in corner 2 or anything that time. And I knew by the bottom of the track I got at least a silver medal. And my thought was, of course, well, Jessica Ennis-Hill got a gold and a silver, and that's really awesome. So I'm really chuffed that I've done the same as Jess Ennis-Hill. And then I saw Laura quite quickly after she was stood by the telly screen that I'm sure people at home were watching. We had the same screen, too many numbers, too many colours, and we didn't understand anything. And watched Janine come down the track. And unfortunately for her, there was one mistake, another mistake, and it just kind of kept losing time and going wrong. Once I knew I'd got a potential gold medal, then we were desperately working out whether Laura was also going to make it onto the podium. And that was really exciting, actually, to be stood next to Laura, who was in fourth place, trying to just eke into the podium. And that was awesome when we realised we'd both done it. Sochi was great because I had been successful. Pyeongchang was amazing because we were on top of the world, but together. And I'm hugely grateful for Laura's partnership, I think, in achieving that together. I wouldn't have done it without her, and I wonder if she'd say the same. I don't know, but that was pretty awesome.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, goosebumps hearing that story in terms of just how you've spoken so much about the team, the fact that this is a journey that you go on together, and it's amazing to hear that in that moment of personal success, that your attention very quickly moves to your teammates and their experience too.
Yeah, it totally does, because as I said, the teas and the Downton Abbeys, that's not by myself, that's with Laura, with Donna, with others. So it's awesome to be able to be celebrating together.
And so let's fast forward to today. So double Olympic champion. What happens after, and how are you now thinking? What's your sort of goals? Have you got any, or the goals sort of superfluous? Do you need those now? What's your focus?
I think goals are always wonderful in life. I wish I had more. Maybe not physical goals, but other things. Now in life, I think I'm still transitioning. I retired 2 years ago, but the transition process is long, and it has to be long. It's an emotional journey as well as everything else. After I retired, or maybe just before I retired, I had that knee operation for the tumour, and then my back. I had major issues with my back and had 2 slip discs worked on. So it becoming kind of a normal person is still very much happening and changing, and I'm understanding who I am as a non-athlete. I think my dreams are to still be involved in sport. I love elite sport, and so I work on the board of the BBSA, which I'm hugely passionate about. It's tough work. It's a lot of voluntary work, a lot of time, but to just be a part of an athlete's journey in a different way is really interesting. And then hopefully to become an executive coach, that would be a dream, to be able to have conversations with people, to work on their potential and what they want to do. Yeah.
Amazing. So last question from me then, Lizzy. So you mentioned that you do school talks, and it sounds like a real passion of yours to go in and speak to children. If you had a back to the future moment where you could go back and share a message with your younger self, the one that was looking up and thinking about the potential of sporting success, what now that you know what you know, what would you tell your younger self?
I always struggle with this sort of a dilemma. Goldie Sayers came into my school at secondary, and I'm trying to remember what Goldie would have said to me that obviously really clicked. And do you know what? It wasn't what she said. I went over to her after, just literally to talk to her, and she had the Olympic opening ceremony suit on, or this lovely suit, and in the pins of the pinstripe suit it said Athens 2004 Olympic Games, Athens 2004 Olympic Games. And I was just like, if they have such nice stuff for clothes, imagine what the whole Olympic Games is going to be like. So I think I'd probably not say something, but just maybe show something tangible, and or try and explain the feeling, because the feeling to be a part of a team all aiming for this amazing, hairy, silly goal 4 years away, it's overwhelming, but it's just so motivating and wonderful when that group of people achieve it. And that success could be anything. It's not gold medals, it is anything. I would say to be a part of something, to do something meaningful is such a privilege.
Love that. Lizzy, it's been amazing talking to you, and it's been incredible to watch you over the years. The manner in which you've performed, as well as exactly what you've just described about that sort of school assembly type moment of representing your sport so well. It's been an absolute delight hearing you recount your experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much.